Well, today on our episode with Basics and Beyond Wellness with Judy Rose, I have a guest here that is joining us who is Cindy Thompson. Cindy Thompson is a registered clinical counselor and an executive coach. She has a podcast of her own called A Resilience Project. She also has been helping folks in the industry and counseling for over 30 years. So she is got a lot of hours under her belt to really have been a good listener and really helping people through life's hardest situations. I know from my own sake that she has been a fabulous friend and a fabulous coach and counselor for my own life. So I wanted to have Cindy on here today because I think part of the wellness aspect for everyone is to connect with our own emotions and to connect with our own mindsets. And what was really burning for me lately is to think about the stories that we tell ourselves, whether they're true, whether they're not true, and then how we actually can pivot and get a change of mind or a change of perspective. Because as you know, I really do believe that we need to stay optimistically curious. And so possibly the way things have always been don't have to stay that way. And possibly the way that we've gone through things is maybe a little bit skewed. Maybe it wasn't that way at all. Maybe it's up to us to consider that there might be a different story around the story that we've told ourselves. So I'm super motivated to listen to what Cindy has to say today. And I'm so thrilled for you that you get to spend a little time with me in this interview. Good morning. Today we have Cindy Thompson joining us. Cindy Thompson is a registered clinical counselor and executive coach. She has been working with people for many years. I'll get her to tell you a little bit about her story in a few moments. Cindy works with individuals to explore how adversity has shaped their lives and how new outcomes can be created with optimism, with clarity, strength, and through courage, thoughtful, value-based therapy. I know I personally have benefited from therapy with Cindy, which is one of the reasons why I invited her to join us today. And I'm not ashamed to say that because I believe in therapy and I believe in coaching. And I think that the world's a better place because Cindy does what she does. So thank you so much today for joining us and sharing from your wealth of experience and maybe helping us in our journeys today.
Thank you, Judy.
So I love it on your website. So cindythompsoncounseling.ca is where you can be reached at. But I loved seeing that you said we are the hero of our own story. So maybe, and you also highlighted that everyone has a story, which I love. I've actually been saying that. I think when I originally invited you to join us today, I said, I would really love it if you would talk to us today about the stories we tell ourselves and maybe some of the pitfalls of getting into a trap that with our own stories, or maybe how we can use those stories to facilitate a new story or a new part of our journey. So I guess to start off with, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your story and where you come from and, you know, what's brought you kind of to this place today.
I'd be happy to. Well, I think of myself as I listen to that introduction, and thank you, Judy. I think of myself as kind of like a Sherpa. So when people have goals or a journey they're wanting to take, whether it's personal, emotional, they maybe have some ways in which they want to explore new areas within themselves. And I'm not going to tell people where to go and how I'm going to just show them some ways that they could get there, and I'm going to help carry their bags. Ooh. And so that's kind of how I think of my role. So I listen for what goals people have. My actual beginning of my story in this field was many, many years ago. I feel like it's going to really date me, but it's been over 36 years that I've been part of this sort of field of psychology, and I think of it as the people industry.
Well done.
And so
well done for not burning out and still staying the course with us.
Well, I feel like because I think of it like, again, I'm not carrying everything for them. I'm really helping, guiding, showing them some ways forward. So I started out actually in psychiatric nursing was the first part of my training. And at the same time, I had already finished my undergrad degree. And I'm the kind of person that likes to keep learning. So after maybe 3 or 4 years, I started to get that spark for more. I'm ready to kind of keep growing and learning. So I went back and did my master's degree in counseling. And so with that combination, it's been kind of a sweet opportunity to help people in a variety of ways. And my career has taken me in many paths. Some of it has been within the mental health field, but that I've also been in private practice for about 20 years now. So what's really cool is, again, under that growth umbrella, about 5 years ago, I went into the executive coaching program at Royal Roads University. And again, it gave me another spark for new ways of helping, because I would see people in my practice that were maybe business owners, and I wished that I had a opportunity to help them in a new way and the right questioning. So that program really gave me a whole other repertoire and toolbox of things that I could do to help business owners, leaders, women in business, people who really want to grow. So I do both. I continue to have both practices, but it's really been a nice way to keep it life-giving in my field.
Absolutely. I love that. I've always said that. And one of the things that I repeat often on this podcast is for us to be encouraged to stay optimistically curious. And so I think years ago, I also had a counselor friend who said to me, if we could just get better at asking different or better questions. And hopefully we'll dive into some of that too, of how does a person go and tap into asking better questions? How do we know if the questions that we're asking ourselves are actually producing the results that they could be? And then how do we develop our skill to ask better questions? Because I know I've had lots of conversations with just friends and people who I have mentored over the years to be able to dive into that skill set all on its own. So hopefully we will dive into that a little bit too, because I think that what I was told, and maybe you can speak to this too, is the whole idea that our brain goes to find an answer. So if we ask a question, then our brain, our psyche, all the mechanisms that make up ourselves will actually go to try to solve that and find a solution for that. And so I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit too. So we have lots to talk about, and so we're going to dive in. Now, maybe we want to talk about, I noticed on your website, it was really awesome laid out, as I was mentioning to you earlier. You've done some tweaking as of late. And also, I just want to mention to listeners that Cindy has her own podcast that she has produced several episodes over the years. And actually today is a relaunch of some of those podcast episodes too. So feel free to look for that. And where can somebody find your episodes?
Yeah, so all of the episodes remain up on most of the major podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, and several others. And it's also from my website. So Cindy Thompson Coaching Counseling, you can go right to that website, and there is a tab at the top where you can see all 117 episodes.
Yes.
So it was over about 3.5 years. And what a great opportunity when you talk about stories. When I started that podcast, I really wanted it to be about individual stories. I'm not the expert on resilience. I certainly have, dove deeply into the whole realm of resilience over the last several years working with humans. But I wanted it to be their stories. So when we have really great adversities, what are the ways in which we bounce back? What are the ways that we get through those hard things? So that's why I wanted to start the podcast, because we learn through stories in many cultures. That's where we learn and discover some new ways of seeing things through those stories. And what better way than through those human examples? So I really had an opportunity to meet people from all over the world on some of their greatest adversities and what were the practices that helped them bounce back from that.
Wow. Well, I am looking forward to just sort of mining your expertise and also your experiences too, because that does make us all richer for it. When we're in the midst of life's heavy asks, I call them.
100%.
What we're being asked to. So now let's dive in a little bit more. How does it go with you? How do you approach when someone would come to see you? How do you approach that? You had mentioned you want to hear about the stories that they're living and try to listen and to hear about where they're coming from, and then what?
Sure. Well, that's such a broad question. Again, it's really about listening for what is their goals and what are they hoping to achieve from this time together. And in the counseling field, or the hat that I wear in counseling, I really look at it as if from the first time we meet, we're getting ready to say goodbye. And the reason I say that is because I want to grow that ability for each individual to be able to self-manage, to have the resources within them, and to trust themselves so they don't need me. And that they learn that they can tap into those resources, those skills, anytime they need to, whether it's a year from now or 5 years from now. So from the get-go, we are listening for what would they like to discover, what would they like to be better in their lives, how would they like to feel more confident or overcome some really great loss that they're going through right now. So again, we're sort of creating a roadmap through that and helping. I think the big thing is giving them hope. In that realm, I think that's probably one of the greatest messages I can give people as I listen for their strengths, as I have them tell their story. Often it is in one of the most difficult times in their lives. But as I ask the right questions, it's about discovering what are the strengths, what have they already been through in their lives, and how can we tap into that? Because again, they already have lots of resilience within them. They just may not recognize it as such.
Isn't that true? I think about my own situations. I think about the times that we've had conversations and how when you are in the middle of sometimes what feels like a battle for your own life, for your own sanity, for your own well-being, your perspective is so shifted from what you might actually be good at because you're focusing on what's hard or on what you need to do to overcome. And so how is that important for people to know their strengths coming out of the gates?
Well, when we're in the middle of the storm, if you will, what happens is we get tunnel vision, and it's a bit of a survival technique. And so what happens is we're in the amygdala, that sort of fear place of our brain, and we're not sure how to get through it. And we're not sure when the end is going to come. How will we know when grief might soften? How do we know if every day isn't going to be like this forever? And that's what I hear a lot for people, just as that example. So I think about it as giving them a bit of a roadmap to say, you're here, but I want you to know it won't always be this hard. And here's some ways that you can help yourself work through it, not by ignoring it, not by trying to just stay busy or check out, but to check in and help ourselves to be able to say, what do I need right now? Maybe I need space. Maybe I need some time just to heal and not stay busy and distract. Maybe I need to connect with friends. So we start to explore those possibilities. And that's why I often refer to myself as a possibilitarian, because
love it.
We are always looking for the possibilities, even in some of the hardest moments. So in our work together, we are helping people get from that amygdala to the prefrontal cortex of our brains and help to calm the fear part of our brain so that we can start to get back online and think more clearly. But when we are in the middle of it, it's really hard to see that and experience it and draw on those strengths. And so part of our job is to help build those tools so we can settle our nervous system and be able to remember that wise person in our brain, that prefrontal cortex that's going to guide us through.
Awesome. What happens when they get back into their prefrontal cortex and then they have the ability to, my understanding of prefrontal cortex is that's our executive functions. That's the place where we get to make decisions and also get off of a different train of thought and move on to a new train of thought. So there's that component of having a healthy prefrontal cortex, which is really useful as well. So once you've got them to go from that fear response and you've moved them into this place where now that they can take a look at things and identify maybe some of those aspects that it got blocked, or that's the way I understand it. When we have a fear of flight mechanism, then we are somewhat blocked because of that place that we're held in. So what are some techniques that, you can teach us about today? And
oh my gosh, I'll have to narrow the field because there's so many.
Yes.
Well, as I was listening to you speak there, Judy, what was coming to mind was the importance, again, going back to the story that we tell ourselves are just natural, what I like to refer to as the superhighway. So sometimes we will go on to a sort of a fear-based thinking pattern. So even though in this moment I might help people walk back into that prefrontal cortex and think more calmly, take a nice deep breath, that can help us, just calm our nervous system. But if throughout the day we are regularly revisiting that fear place, like what if this happens? What if this goes wrong? What if I'm not successful? What if I'm not able to reach my goals? Or what if my kids go driving today and something bad happens? Like a lot of us are regularly in that place of trying to prepare ourselves for really hard things. And yet thinking about it doesn't change the circumstances. It just makes us feel more stressed on a regular basis. So my job is helping people to rewire their brains and be able to access a healthier way of thinking. So if you're used to going on that superhighway, I think of it like if you're going to drive home in a new route than what you normally do, it takes intention. It means I might turn left instead of right. I might take a more scenic route home, and that might be healthier for me. So it helps us be able to think differently about situations, and it is a practice that takes intention. And so instead of going, what if this happens, you could say, you know what, things typically work out okay. All those times that I feared, it's going to be okay. And if not, then I'll deal with it when it happens. I don't have to anticipate that something bad is going to happen.
Why do we do that? I think of so many times, I think of even last night, waking up in the night. And somehow there's this attitude that if we can prepare in advance for every eventuality, that we'll be farther ahead, we'll be better equipped. And why do we do that? Because it's a loop that we get on. So how do we convince ourselves to get off that loop and move into a different one, or to say, you know what, taking a new way around this is actually going to be worthwhile? Because there is a sense, don't you think, that we're convinced that if I problem solve this one hard enough and think about it long enough, that somehow the answer will come to me.
Yeah, so true. And I think all of us are inclined that way. It's like a negativity bias that we are inclined towards. So that's why I say it is an intention to notice it and capture it in the moment and go, oh yeah, I jokingly call it the stinky thinking path, and my clients laugh about that, but it's just a fun way of going, oh yeah, I'm on that really fast superhighway, the stinky thinking path. And the further we travel on that path, the more negative things we find that we could be worried about. So the goal here is to just picture a stop sign and go, you know what, this is not really helpful. It's not going to change the circumstances. I'm going to come over here and choose what I'm going to think about. So it's choosing another pathway. And the good news is the more we practice that, the easier it's going to get, and the more that we're going to start to notice the good things. And the sooner we're going to recalibrate and rewire our brains to be able to notice and capture the good and think more encouragingly. I try not to just say positive, because we're not talking rainbows and unicorns, but maybe more helpful kind of thinking that is softer, has more grace, and helps us revisit, again, that trust within ourselves, that we are going to be prepared to handle whatever we need. We don't have to be overthinking it ahead of time. So that's kind of how I like to look at it.
Well, even as you were saying that, even that made me realize that sometimes will fly in the face of a story that we might be telling ourselves that maybe we won't, have the answer, or we don't have what it takes to have a better outcome. And in that will fly in the face. And that's a confidence issue, but it kind of is a story. And maybe it's not true. And, you know, how much of that do we have to get a better self-perception before we can move forward on some things? Is that something that you see with folks and that you have to help them first before they'll even consider that maybe they, in fact, can get on a different highway or take a different way home, is to believe that they can?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the things I like to let people know about is that we can actually rewire our brains right up until we die. So you know that old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I'm blowing that out of the water.
Awesome.
It's been proven that that's not the case. So it does take a practice though. So if you think about it like I'm going to learn how to speak Spanish and I go to lessons once a week, but I don't think about Spanish anytime in between my lessons, that the progress is going to be slower. But if we take the skills and we practice this day to day and we start looking for what's good or kinder, even in our story about ourselves, then that is going to change our stress threshold. It's going to change how we experience our day-to-day life. And that instead of being maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10 for stress every day, we're now dialing that down to maybe a 3 or 4. And as we go about our day, if we're at a 3 or 4 out of 10, we have capacity for some new things that might come along. And that way we can be prepared and have that ability to handle it in a really clear-minded way. But if we are regularly creating our own storm through this negative perception, this fear-based approach to life, then we're putting ourselves, even in the fact that maybe there's nothing major happening in my life right now, but I'm actually creating my own storm day to day in the level of stress I feel, then we're at a 7 or 8. And so then there isn't much capacity. If we're at a 7 or 8 and then something else in addition happens, some small irritant, it can put us over the edge. So I like to help people be aware of where is that barometer in a sense. Can you bring it down? Can you check in on a regular basis to say, where is that? And what are the things that I might be creating for myself that are in the absence of anything real as a threat?
Oh, yes. Because isn't that the acronym for fear, right? Is false evidence appearing real. And so we can be absolutely convinced 100% that this bad thing will surely come to pass.
100%, yeah. Well, and one of the ways that we can mitigate that as an intentional practice is to capture every day 5 things that went well. And the second piece to that is, why did it go well and why? What went well and why? And so that we are regularly looking for what's good.
And unpacking it a bit too.
Yes.
So instead of, I do hear a lot, and I think there's a point to being grateful, and, you know, that causes you to sort of highlight positive things that are happening and to be from that point of view of positive good things that are coming upon you instead of the bad things. But to be able to do that, repeat that again. So you unpack it to actually not just highlight the things that you're even grateful for or that you see that are good, but to take it a little bit further.
Yes. So yes, the gratitude practice is proven to be very effective in helping us manage our stress and see the good each day. But I like the piece which comes from positive psychology, which is to ask yourself what went well.
What went well?
And why?
And why?
Yes. So in other words, even in a storm, we can then capture something that we handled well. That, I typically panicked in that situation, but today I didn't. Or that I had this distraught customer come in and they weren't very happy, and this is how I handled it. Or I was able to stay calm. And even a slight nuance of what we might have done differently can be an indication of something that went well. They don't have to be big things. They can be the little nuances within our day. Maybe I went to work and I hit all the green lights. That went well today. Maybe I responded differently to a difficult situation or in a conflict. Or maybe I was able to notice the sunrise this morning on the way to work. And that helped me set my tone and look for the good the rest of the day. So there's lots of little ways that we can do that. And maybe to speak to the gratitude practice, Judy, I have a story that comes from the podcast, which was one of my guests, Tim Ringgold. And he spoke about having a daughter who was very, very sick and was in hospital. And I can't remember the actual disease, but Tim had already a very strong practice of noticing gratitude every day. And he would sit down next to his bed and kneel down and do a gratitude practice every evening. And so even though his daughter was very sick and was in hospital, he continued that practice. And unfortunately, his daughter passed away, but he spoke on the podcast about being able to continue that practice even on the night she died, and to be grateful for the medical staff that were there to help her, to help them, to be able to feel grateful about the doctors who will continue to study this very rare disease and help other children. And these are some examples that when we make it a practice, it's like a second nature or a habit that we don't have to look for it. We already have it in our toolkit.
And it helps others. I listen to this and I think I can think also of many people would say, well, how can you be grateful that, there's all this, my daughter's sick and these really negative things are happening. And, I can certainly speak to this in my own life of situations, but also how do you encourage someone to see the good that is actually also there alongside the really hard stuff?
It's a great question, because sometimes in the moment when we're in the early days of it, we can't see it. It's sometimes upon reflection after we're through the worst of it or the hardest of the storm, then we can start to look back. And that's what I found with pretty much most guests that I interviewed on the podcast. It was then after the fact that they looked back and looked at the people that came around to support them, the support group for a cancer group that they were attending, the sense of community that they had, or the ways in which they discovered what they're capable of, that they're stronger than they thought they were. And that's often the case, that after we look back, like you'll look back, any of your listeners are going to look back on a time in their lives where it was awful, it was devastating. And Judy, you know yourself. Yeah. But then you can go, okay, what did I learn about myself in that? What surprised me? And I like to draw that out in people because we don't often think that way.
I know from my own situation when I first met you, I was in the process too of actually acknowledging the hard thing, because I tend to be quite a positive outlook person, and what can actually happen for those like myself is that we want to get the heck out of the hard times so fast. I just don't want to stay there. Because I don't find that it is the answer, for life-giving. And yet there is that portion of it that I had to just sit in it also and cause my own self to acknowledge the stuff that was going on in order to move from that place and not just gloss over it and think that, okay, I've moved on, I've moved past that. But to actually sit in and say, yeah, that was really hard, and that seems impossible, and seems wrong, also because I do believe that there's inside of us a sense of justice that we're always trying to reconcile. Well, this shouldn't have happened, and why did this happen? And try to dig deeper because we have this sense of justice of the scales of life and death and all things good and, and not responsive to good, all of that. So how do you help someone to, in my situation, I can speak to that, I wanted to just move past this. And I remember you specifically saying to me, acknowledging actually the hard things, you had to keep pulling me back and saying, Judy, these were hard things that you've had to endure. And for those of my listeners that don't know, I lost an adult son to suicide, and he was 26 at the time, 27 at the time. And it was devastating, obviously, to our family, and not actually that long ago. So I'm still in what I call my place of recovery and probably my lifelong journey. And, you know, I am a believer in moving through the seasons of life and whatever they comes the way. But I know for my own self, this is what drew me to say, okay, right, I need a little help, because for my own self, I felt like I was shutting down. And I think I came to you saying, I don't understand what's happening. Why do I feel like someone put a mute button on me? I had no drive to be involved in community, or, you know, I knew I didn't want to be alone, and I knew I didn't want to stay in that, you know, difficult place, but I couldn't quite see myself motivated to move beyond that. And so all I could describe it was is that I had someone press the mute button. And you had to come in, and you so very kindly offered some reality to it that validated the difficulty. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, we were able to move past that to be able to then utilize some of these things. And I think it's all kinds of ways that we need to engage to be self-aware, I think, because that's what I'm hearing. A lot of what you're saying is it's really encouraging us all to be intentional and to be a little bit more aware. And so then there's the balance of being in gratitude, but also mindful gratitude, you know, that we can acknowledge what's really happening and then the good in the midst of all that. Just like this gentleman's son being sick. It's a horrendous, difficult situation when a child, you know, it's outside of our control and they are suffering. Any loved one, but it's really, I can speak to the whole
loss.
Whole loss. So
well, maybe what I can offer up is a few things that are coming to mind. Is one is having some self-compassion. Again, it kind of goes back to how do we talk to ourselves?
Yes.
In the way that we might give compassion to others and hold space for others, we need to do the same for ourselves, and to be able to say, yeah, this really sucks. This is really hard. And I've never been through anything like this before, so why would I know how to navigate it?
Right.
So that self-compassion piece, I think, is really critical at any point with anything we're going through that's really hard. But also you spoke, Judy, to the importance of not trying to navigate it alone. If you think about history of cultures of grieving, we come together. We are surrounded by family and friends. We tell the story. We share stories about that individual. And that part of the healing journey is so critical because it holds space for you to keep processing as a mother what you remember about your son and what the stories were and how important he was to you, and to hear from others how he impacted them as well. And so we need to be interdependent. I always try to use the phrase radical interdependence, because so many people in our society are trying to handle things on their own. We are told from very young, be independent. And some of the old sort of stories we were given growing up was that we needed to be strong and just handle it. And yet we do better when we are in the community, in company of others, and that rather reaching out to seek some counseling to say, help me with this. I don't know how to do this. Beautiful. Like, way to go. Because sometimes we're going through really difficult things we've never been through before. And yet when we come together as and sharing that story, it helped you revisit that grief and hold space. And often we want to check out. So I just think that's the other piece I think is worth mentioning. I encourage people to kind of think of the phrase checking in before you check out. When we get too busy or we stay busy so we don't have to think or feel, when we just keep trying to press on, our bodies are going to tell us that we can't keep going. And that's where the numbness might show up. It's like your body going, we're not done with this, right? Let's pay attention. So I really encourage people to check in. What does my body need right now? Right? What does my heart need? And just to put your hand over your heart and to say, okay, let's just listen. Take a deep breath. What does your heart have to say? What does your gut have to say? Because that allows us to listen to our bodies and not just distract. Because a lot of times people don't want to feel. And that's what they're avoiding.
It's true, especially when it feels bad.
Totally.
I mean, it's a pretty understandable feelings like, let's get off of this train very quickly. I don't need to go there. And yet, isn't it interesting that some people can, I mean, we're talking about grief right now, but we can be talking about rage or, acute anger where we're feeling a sense of out of control, which I think, also ties into what I felt with my own grief is that this thing happened to me and I had no say, seemingly on the whole thing. So, and the timing and all that, even when you think about someone dealing with a traumatic event that suddenly event that came upon them. And there can be a lot of acute anger. And it's been my experience that people get comfortable with the emotion that they're comfortable with. So I got comfortable with the emotion of looking on the bright side and just moving on and just moving past that and doing better next time. And that did not serve me really well because, as you said, it was like my body was trying to say, no, we're not done with this yet. And I'm like, oh, no, I am. Yeah. I'm pretty much
I'm over
done.
it.
I'm really over it. But what about the people, too, they get just angry and they're used to engaging in rage instead of, is it the same thing that's going on in our brain when we do that?
Yes. I think of it like it's hard to be vulnerable. So the invitation is to see where that vulnerability is. And for many people, that's what they've either learned or it's become a coping skill. They maybe witnessed it growing up with maybe a parent that was really angry and that they didn't learn to just honor their feelings. So being able to check in with that vulnerability, and that's a hard word because many people don't want to feel that. We want to feel strong. We want to put our coat of armor on and think that we can just carry on. When in fact, when we name it, the people maybe have heard that saying, name it to tame it. When we listen for what's underneath that, and that's often what I invite people to consider in the work that I do. Yeah, that anger is showing up because there's so much that's bottled up inside there. And I think of it like a volcano. When a volcano doesn't start erupting from the very top, that's where you witness it, but it really starts to brew deep down inside. So what else is down there? What's below the surface? That's really something you're not wanting to sit with. And by being angry, it's almost like we're pushing people away. And we don't want to feel those more vulnerable feelings.
And I liked what you mentioned about that this can be a way that our family has dealt with something. And so then we've learned these patterns and these ways of responding. And I would say that's even, we learn language from our family. So we learn actual words, we learn actual questions to ask ourselves, to ask of others when things happen. And one of the things I did want us to dive into a little bit is these stories that we tell ourselves. Like, how do we tell ourselves different stories? How do we approach that? Because even in that scenario that you gave, it's like, well, I've heard this several times from people. Well, my dad was this way. And so, to be a man, I mean, you can't begrudge a guy for thinking that, he's learned how to be a man from his father or his uncle or his grandfather or the other important men in his life. Well, that's the way men are. How does one go about tackling that to rewrite that? Is it possible to really change that?
100%. That's the good news. That's the possibilities.
Right.
It's the first being aware of it. How's that working for you? If I'm regularly thinking about it from that negative lens and I'm feeling lousy a lot of the time, I would say check in, right? How's that working? But it's giving people the language to shift that and look at your strengths. What helped me get through that? So when a bit of my personal story is my mom got sick when I was quite young. So at 13, I was 13, she had a brain tumor and had to go in for a second surgery to try to shrink that brain tumor. And the surgery did not go well. And she was left disabled for several years after. So she lived in a care home after that. And yet when I can look back on some of those hardships, some of those difficulties that we went through as a family, I see how community came together to help us. I see that people at my school saw me and really tried to support me. And so there's many good things that we can learn about ourselves, the strengths within us. So when I go through a hard thing now, I go, what have I already been through? And how can I draw on that strength that I can name within myself? And I often get clients to write that down. What are the strengths that you've discovered? How am I tenacious? How do I have grit? How do I have maybe some patience for myself when I'm going through hard things? So what are those practices that I've already discovered and tapped into that I can rely on right now? But we don't often think about what we've already got in our toolkit. And so that's the encouragement, is to draw on those strengths to rewrite that story. And I think about our story not being about the scars, but it's about seeing those strengths and building on it. Just a side story. My husband and I took up sailing about 8 years ago when we were empty nesters. And I'm a flatlander. And I've never sailed before. And so you should have seen me the first time stepping on that boat. And we were just taking a sailing course. I was terrified. I was like a toddler. But I learned so much about myself in not only what I was discovering, but what I was capable of. Did I ever think I could dock a 30-foot sailboat? Well, you had to pass this course. Could I memorize all the parts of that sailboat and learn about them? Yes. But I had to believe in myself that I was capable. And I think that's where, because I'm someone who's always willing to learn and keep growing, that's where we discover those strengths. If we play it safe, if we just sit on the couch, that's not where we've learned about ourselves the most. When we have tried something new, applied for a new job, gone through something challenging, that's where we discover what we're actually capable of doing. So in that sailing course, I often think back to that, and now we do have a sailboat, and we're not through those adversities. Every time you go out, there's a possibility of hard things could happen, but it's trusting in what you already have in your boat as well. You can adjust your sails. You can reef them. You can access different tools within the boat to manage what you need. You can have your lifelines ready. You can have your anchor. Like, there's so many things, and it's a beautiful metaphor for ourselves. But we need to be able to access that and remember them well, so we bring them with us everywhere we go. And we're not only just building into that, but we're tapping into what's already there instead of just that negative story we've been telling ourselves.
I love that. I love that. And also, it's a positive thing to acknowledge what you already have built in. And maybe it's the instruct you to what you need to bolster up. I remember when I was going through a few difficulties with a fracturing in the family, I remember noticing within my own self that I was a little bit on shaky ground. So like a chair with 4 legs is a little more stable than a chair with 3 legs. And 3 legs is still more stable than a chair with 2 legs. And certainly one, while you're able to pivot really well, but the stability of should something go wrong isn't quite there. And I remember kind of feeling like that, going, oh, my touch points were weak. I didn't have strong enough tethers to some, good substantial friendships or some relationships that needed to be there to speak into my life, to affirm or to remind or to ask me questions, to get me out of my funk. So I love that analogy that you gave, is just being able to look and say, what do you already have? Because we probably do have more going for us than what we have grace for. Especially, I feel like in this society, is very much be self-sustaining. And I mean, if nothing else, we realize that community is really a huge aspect. And that's where I believe that we're seeing, the result of the isolation from post-pandemic situation in the world. And I'm quite passionate about that this whole aspect of community be really addressed and skill sets be addressed, and how can we talk about things that we've been silent for? Silence is just a killer. So it's a killer when I get in my own head. It's a killer because I fail to recognize some of these really important components that have already been built up. And then to be able to go, now tell me, because I'm curious about this, what is the difference between counseling and coaching?
Great question.
So,
Yes.
you know.
Well, even the approach of how, like as a counselor, when I have that hat on, it's often I'm helping to build in psychoeducational skills to help people understand about depression or anxiety or grief. And so I'm not only listening and listening for those strengths, but I'm also building skills and teaching, right? It's not unusual that I'm sharing cognitive behavior therapy, various approaches that are going to serve people well down the road. In coaching, when I have a coaching client come to me, I listen for what those goals are. But what we're doing is I'm just asking all the right questions, hopefully, in that helping them come up with their own answers. And I use coaching in my counseling as well. But for a coaching, I keep it very clear and clean. We're not to mix the two. And so having both hats is a bit tricky.
I would think.
Yes. But I mean, anytime I even am coaching somebody, I come with that whole package regardless. I just am not showing that hat in our sessions. But I might ask questions like, if you did that, or if you weren't afraid, what would you be doing right now? If you wanted to reach for that goal, how will things be different? If 10 years from now you were able to be successful, how is that going to feel for you? And what's standing in your way? So I'm not answering it for them. The client is very much answering their own questions.
Wow. I just got in my head, I was like, she's the perspective wizard. You can help grow our perspectives, which I absolutely endorse and just love. And I'm so grateful that you're here in our community here in Parksville and serving, I imagine, the whole of the island. Do you do any virtual
Yes.
sessions as well with people? So it doesn't
Right
really,
across the country.
doesn't really
Yes.
matter where you're from. Just
No.
get on the same time zone on the schedule and you can be found. So
Yes. And that's why I did the podcast as well. I wanted it to reach people all over the world and not just limit it to people coming into my office. And that's one of the ways that I think COVID, that's another, again, the blessing out of COVID was that we learned that we can reach out and build community even virtually in a greater way, even though it was hard at first. It's another way that we can access services and not be in the same community. So that's why I love it.
Yes, exactly. That was the good thing that came out of it. Cindy, thank you so much for joining me today. And of course, my brain is buzzing and I have so many more questions for you. And I know that our listeners would really enjoy hearing more. So hopefully you'll come back again soon, and you can look forward to more episodes just to maybe we'll call you Coach Cindy and to join us here on Basics and Beyond with Judy Rose. So thankful that you could join us again, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you, Judy. And I appreciate what you're doing for our community as well. I feel like you are a partner in this, in helping people in the services you provide, because we each can play a role. There's not the same tool for everybody for all situations. And I really appreciate what you're doing as well. And so glad you've opened your business here.
I appreciate that very much. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy, so much. That's Cindy Thompson with cindythompsoncounseling.ca, or to be found on her podcast, A Resilience Project. You can find her there. But thank you so much for joining us today, for giving us so many insights on how to navigate the waters of the stories we tell ourselves, and also to maybe reconsider some of the ways that we go through our days with a new perspective, and even tapping into some of the local resources that we do have and finding a good counselor near you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please like and follow the channel. Join us for future episodes to find out what others are discovering on their wellness journey and what help is available. Stay optimistically curious, because your life is worth it.